Hi and welcome back to another NX tutorial in my How to Sketch in NX CAD series. Today we'll go through 4 things. These are the following functions that I'll be talking about today. The first one is Quick Trim. Quick Trim is used to trim lines and curves in sketch mode. The second one is Quick Extend, which is used to extend lines and curves in sketch mode. The third thing is Rapid Dimension. This is used to set specific measurements to lines and curves. And the last one is Geometric Constraints. This function sets specific constraints to lines, like holding 2 lines endpoints at the same level at all times. We'll talk more about this later in the video. So now I'll go through Quick Extend and Quick Trim. So let's start with Quick Extend. So you get this box and you get 2 other boxes. So in the first one it says boundary curve, and in the second one it says curve to extend. So let me show you what this one means. So if we start by pressing here and then go to here. So over here we want to extend this line that I'm hovering over. We want to extend this line to here. So if I press here and then in the middle line, then I set my boundary curve. Then I go over here to select curve and then back to my line that I want to extend. Now, if I press that, you can see that it extends to the boundary that we selected. But then I want to remove this line and keep, I want to remove this line, this whole one, and just keep this one in the middle. Then we can use Quick Trim. So we press that and we get a similar menu. So if we select our curve, our boundary curve, so we want to keep this one, right? Then we select this one as our boundary. Then curve to trim, press here, and then the curve that we want to trim, this one. So as you can see, it lights up red, and that's how we can see what it's going to trim. So like that. You can also use Quick Extend like this. If we want just extend it, we can just drag like this and it'll extend over here. And if we take it on the right side of the middle like this, and we can do the same thing with Quick Trim. If we want to remove this whole one in between these one, because they'll act as our boundary now. So we can remove them like this. And we don't need to choose anything over here. We just drag it over like this, or remove it all. So as you can see, when I press Rapid Dimensions, I get a box. Got first, select first object, select second object. And then with this box, you can basically ignore it for now. And then measurements. So the method of measurements, you can choose it and it'll be different. It'll work differently, I mean. So inferred basically does everything automatically. But I'll go through each one of them. So let's start with horizontal. So when you use horizontal and then select the first object, select this as our first object and this as our second. Then we can set the horizontal measurement between them like this. But if we have select horizontal, we can't set a measurement of the height. As you can see, is just 0. Now we have vertical. So vertical works in the same way as horizontal, just 90 degrees to that. So I can't set a measurement from the left to the right like this. It just becomes 0. But I can use the vertical one and set the vertical distance between these two, or the vertical distance between these two. So now we have point to point. So what point to point is that we can choose any point of this. So this one, or this one, or this one, to set the measurement to any of these 3 points. You see, the starting line, midline, and end line. So like this one to here. Now we get the distance between these two, or from this one to this one, and so on and so forth. You can go from this one to this one as well. Just keep going. So that's point to point. So the next one is perpendicular. So it's basically, it'll measure out the perpendicular distance between these two. From this one to here, you can see it'll measure out the perpendicular distance, because this is 90 degrees to this. So the next one is cylindrical, but we don't use that in a 2D sketch, so I'm gonna skip that for now and come back to that later. So next one is angular. So angular is pretty basic. It just gives you the angle between 2 lines like this. Now you can set that to any number like this. Radial just gives you the radius of the circle like this. So every time you type something in, like 2, it'll just be this distance between them, not the whole one. Now we have diameter, the last one. This gives us, like the line says, the whole distance from this point to this point, like so. So to create different shapes, you're using 3 different things. You're using a line, an arc, and a circle. And to define these 3 things in our CAD room, we need to use constraints. So constraints can be rapid dimensions, or they can be geometrical constraints. So now I'm going to show you if you want to do only rapid dimensions to constrain a line, an arc, and a circle. So let's start with the line. Let's go into sketch mode. So let's use the line like this. As you can see, it says fully constrained with 4 auto dimensions. So the 4 dimensions is the X and Y position of the start point and the X and Y position of the end point. So if I use rapid dimensions and then I use it to go the Y, and then I do the X, the X like this. Now you can see full constraint with 2 auto dimensions, and then I set this one, and then it says fully constrained with 1 auto dimension, and then again, then it says fully constrained. And it's fully constrained because it knows where it begins in the X and Y position and where it ends in the X and Y position. Then we have a circle. So the circle has 3 dimensions that you need to set. So the first one is the size. So when you set the size, it says 2 dimensions. And then you need to set where it is in our space. And that is the X and Y position of the center point of the circle, like this. Oops, like this. Third horizontal, like that. As you can see, it says fully constrained because it knows where it is in height, in width, and the size of it. So the next one is arc. So the arc works by needs 5 constraints, as it says here. So the first one is the radius of our arc. The next one is the X position of the start point and the X position of the end point. And then you can set the X and Y position of the center point, like this. And then it says fully constrained. A great way to see if you've done it correctly is by just taking this and try to drag it. If it's not constrained like this, then you can take and move it around like this. So the next thing we'll go through is geometric constraints. So we have quite a lot of different geometric constraints. The first one we'll go through is coincidence. So what coincidence does, it merges 2 endpoints together. So let's try it out. Let's make 2 lines like this, and then like this. Then let's choose coincidence. Then press this endpoint and this endpoint. As you see, the 2 endpoints merge. The next one is point on curve. So point on curve does what it says. If you have a curve like this one, and then you have a line, then you can use point on curve to set this point onto the curve like that. Then we have tangent. So what tangent does is it sets this line to be tangent to this arc, which means that whatever curvature it has on that specific point, it will have, it'll continue with this line. So like this. So if we drag them closer to each other like that, as you can see, now they're tangent. The next one is parallel. So parallel does, if you have 2 lines like this and you want them to be parallel, then you use this one like this. The first one, the second one, and then they're both parallel to each other. The next one is perpendicular. So if we want this line to be 90 degrees to this line, then we can use perpendicular. So we select the object to constrain and the object to constrain to, and as you can see, now they're 90 degrees to each other. The next one is horizontal. So if we have a curve or a line like this one, I want it to be horizontal, then we just press horizontal and then select object to constrain like this, and now it's horizontal. The next one is vertical. So vertical makes it vertical instead of horizontal, like this. Now it's horizontal. Then we can use horizontal alignment. So if we want like this endpoint and this endpoint to be in the same height, then we can use horizontal alignment like this. So press this point and this point. So as you can see, my select object to constraint 2 will be this point. And now they're always horizontally aligned. The next one is vertical alignment. So vertical alignment is basically the same thing, but vertical. So if I choose my object to constrain as this point, and then my object to constraint 2 as this point, as you can see, this point moved closer to this one, and now they're vertically aligned. Now we have midpoint. So what midpoint does is, if we choose to constrain this object to this one's endpoint will match up with this one's, this one's midpoint will match up with this endpoint. So we would choose this object to constrain and this object to constrain 2. As you can see, this one moved, and now the midpoint of this line is at the endpoint of this line. Now we have collinear. So what does collinear mean? It basically means that this line and this line will always be at the same angle. It'll be together. So if we use select object to constrain this one and object to constrain 2 as this one, as you can see, they're always at the same angle. It's basically like we trimmed off a piece of the line. That's what collinear does. Then we have concentric. So if we have two circles like this, and we want this smaller circle to be in the middle of this big circle, then we can use concentric. So object to constrain this one, object to constrain 2, this one. As you can see, the small one is now in the middle of the big line. So basically the midpoints merge together. The next one is equal lengths. So equal lengths makes two lines' lengths the same. So if we want this one and this one to be the same, so we want to create this one to be 40, not 124, then we select object to constrain this one, constrain 2, this one. As you can see, they're both 40 now. So if I make this one longer, like this, the other one's also going to change. The next one is equal radius. So it's basically the same thing as equal lengths, just with radiuses. So if we want them to have the same radius, we press this object to constrain, then object to constrain 2, this one, and now the radiuses are the same. So if I change this radius to 80, that one's also going to change.
Music.